Hey everyone, it's Samantha from Scrapmaster's Paradise, and today is Frugal Friday number 3, and today I thought we would work on some handmade embellishments. Stopped at my local scrapbook store because I actually have fabric, but it's in storage right now, so I went ahead and picked out some fabric, and this one was cut at 1/8 of a yard, which is 6 inches. Let's see, make sure I'm right. It looks like about 5.5 inches, but close enough to 6 inches. That's the lowest size that they would cut for me, and it ended up being about 87 cents for this piece of fabric. And then I got some tulle, and I got these cut at 1/4 of a yard, and so they ended up being about 10 inches. I measured their width, and each of these was 50 cents. So I got those, and I'm gonna work on making some do-it-yourself flower embellishments. I actually really love flowers on projects, but I'm too cheap to buy all those expensive packs of the sewn flowers, so we're going to try to make some today. And if I have time in this video, I will start adding them to some projects, but I'm not sure we're going to get to any projects today. It might just be do-it-yourself embellishments for today, so we'll just see about timing. So what you're going to need is some fabric like that I showed you. You're going to need some thread, and I just found some thread in my mom's sewing kit. I don't really have very much sewing stuff, so it kind of matched, and this was about 50 cents. It says on the top 2 for $1, and a needle. And I've got a variety of buttons. I just picked these buttons out of another one of these containers. I've got 3 of these, so this one's mostly filled with buttons, but I had a couple of different colors of buttons in other containers. So I just picked those out in case I wanted to use them. And some really sharp scissors and a ruler. I'm just going to use my mat. So I'm going to figure out exactly what I'm going to do with these, and then I'll show them to you. Okay, so I've got 2 different designs here for the little flowers. This one I didn't sew around the edges or anything, or fold the fabric. Since it's tulle, it just, wherever you cut it, it stays just fine. I added some white paper so you could see this one, because it's kind of hard to see on the pink. So I've got that one, and then this little sewn one here. Oh, there's 2 different ones, so we're just going to start with one, and I wrote down the measurements and everything. So first we'll start with this one. Oops. Okay, so what I did is I originally cut the fabric 14 by 2 inches. It's actually a little bit under 2 inches, because the strip, when I cut it 14 inches from that strip of fabric, it's a little bit under 6 inches across here. Oh, I can't see my measuring, so it was a little bit shorter than 6 inches when I had this extra strip onto it. And so I cut it a little bit under 2 inches. And it was 14 inches across, but when I got the whole thing done, you can see that, you might be able to see there's teeny tiny little holes where my needle was already on the strip. When I went and did it, it was just too much fabric, so I actually can get 2 flowers out of what I expected to only get 1 flower out of. So this strip is about 7 inches by about 2 inches, give or take just a little bit, because I didn't cut it exactly perfect. And with that, with this whole section here, which is 1/8 of a yard across, and the fabric's 42 inches all the way down the whole strip, it ends up making 18 flowers out of this one strip here. Okay, so I've got the strip. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start sewing it when I fold it across like this. I already got my thread on here, and this probably will be enough thread. It's what I had left over. It does not take much thread at all. I'm going to cheat and just tie a knot here at the end. And I got to warn you guys, I do not really sew. I'm not a sewer. I don't know much about sewing, but I know enough that this project is actually really easy. If I can pick up my needle. Okay, so I've got the knot here near the end. And actually, I didn't do it quite at the end, so I'm going to cut some of this off. It's just not in the way. I've got my strip, and I'm just going to fold it and start at one side here. And to get it started, oops, you can tell I'm not a sewer, I'm dropping things. To get it started, I'm just going to poke it in there through both layers, get all the way near the end, and then stick my needle through that strand. There's actually 2 strands. When you pull it like that, it makes it into a knot, and now it's snug. So then I just hold it, and I'm going to go back and forth, in and out. I'm really close to this frayed edge here. I may be 1/8 of an inch in, and I maybe my zigzags through the fabric are going to be about, oops, got it into a knot here. I don't know why it's all tangly. Oh, I didn't have it pulled straight. Okay. So my little sections where I'm going in and out, they're about 1/4 of an inch apart. You don't want to go right next to the section you're already poking. Make sure I get it through both layers, back and forth. You can tell I don't sew. I'm sure any of you who sew are probably laughing how bad I'm doing this. I got these, they're like 1/4 of an inch in and out, and I'm just gonna pull it as I go, and it makes a little pleated area here, or sorry, ruffled area. In and out, trying to keep my fabric lined up with my other hand so I don't have to keep folding anything. So I'm getting further down. You can see what it looks like there. I've got a piece of the frayed thread there. Going all the way to the end. Okay. So I've gotten all the way to the end, and so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull it really tight. You don't want to pull it so tight you're going to break anything. And then where this other seam is here at the end, I'm going to fold that with this other end, like so. I'm kind of lining them up, and I'm going to sew right through both of these. That way they're lined up together. I'm pulling tight so that the middle is going to be tight. That's what I want to stay tight. I'm going to just go through this same spot a couple of times to tighten it up. That way we don't lose any of that tight, ruffly part. Okay, and so then I'm going to sew these 2 sides together. Same place, I'm just holding them together, and I'm going to go back and forth around this whole side. Just going around and around. That way these 2 frayed ends are sewn together. Okay, so I've got it all sewn together there at the ends. See my little stitches? And I'm going to go back. You can tie your knot here, but I don't want the little end to show, so I'm going to go back down a little ways, like about halfway down. And then I'm going to do my knot here. Oops, getting tight. I didn't have enough thread almost. I'm just going over the same 2 spots so it stays tight. You're supposed to knot that end. I can actually try to knot it after I cut this, so I cut it close to my needle since I'm running out of thread. Hopefully I can get a knot here, I'm not sure. No, I'm not going to be able to get a knot. Well, you would put a knot there, so we'll just say that there's a knot. Hopefully it won't come apart, because I did go over it a couple of times. So there's the little flower. It looks really cute. Let's see about how big it is. It's almost 2 inches across. When you're done here, get this end thread off of that. And then we can add our button. Let's see. So for this one, I had a little bit of that pink flowery part showing, so I used a pink button. But for this one, it's all blue. So I'm going to grab a blue or a turquoise box here. So that actually matches really well. Let's see if we can get anything else that The turquoise buttons match too. Let me grab one I like. Let's see. Actually, that one looks really cute. That one's a little too big. Actually, I like that one. And these are just buttons I have had in my stash for a while. I'm going to add it there, so I'm going to get more thread. And what I did for this one is I used baker's twine. I just had some light blue baker's twine here, and I threaded it in my needle. It really took a long time because my needle is not big enough for this huge piece of thread. So I'd have to get a needle with a bigger eye here. So for this one, I'm just going to use this regular thread that I was using, because I don't want to have to fuss with that baker's twine again. It took me a really long time. I've got some thread. Let's put this on here. I'm sure there's a better trick to this, but I don't really know a good trick to thread the needle. With this thin thread, it's fine. I'm going to do the same thing, add a little knot to the end. Okay, I'm going to try to get it closer to the end so I don't have to cut. There it goes. Okay, I got my little knot. I'll still cut the end. It's not even. There we go. And cut that a little bit. So I'm going to start by going through the back side of this piece. I'm just going to go through one of the little pleat areas and make sure I'm not right in the middle, so I actually go through some fabric. Okay. I'm going to go back in through that same side so I can get my fabric secured. Get my thread secured and go through the two strands because I knotted the end. So that ties my knot. So now my thread is through the fabric and stuck. Okay, we're going to go back up, making sure we're going through the fabric, not through the very center. And now we got to go through the button. And then we're going to go back through. Make sure again we go through the fabric and not the very center. Tighten it up. And we're going to do the same thing again. Through the fabric, line it up with the hole. I'm going to do this like 3, maybe 4 times because I want to make sure my button stays on here and that you can see the thread through the middle of the button. I think it's cute. See, my fabrics or my thread's not even there. Okay, that was 2. This will be 3. Make sure I get through the fabric. That's 3 times. You can see the little inside. Then I'm going to go through here. Oops, not all the way through. I'm just poking through the middle on the back side here. Then I'm going to go through my thread and create a knot. That kind of secures my thread. Go through the same thread piece. Do the same thing to make sure we have a knot going. That way my thread stays on. My thread actually got a little bit loose, but it is knotted, so it'll stay secure. Cut. Let's see what we got. Got a cute little tiny button here. And next time, what I'm going to do, you can see my ends here. This is my seam. They don't quite line up, so what I need to do next time is make sure I line up this outside edge and then start sewing this side where I actually lined up the bottom edge that's hidden with the button. So I would do that a little bit differently next time. But the same kind of concept here. Got 2 different ones. And this fabric is cute because it's got the touch of the pink and the yellow. So it adds a little difference to each of these. These flowers are 2 inches. And the measurement for the fabric was about 2 inches by about 7 inches. If you want a bigger flower, you can just measure your fabric bigger, and whatever you measure your fabric at, let's say we had this at 2 inches, but we folded it over, so we were left with 1 inch on each side. You double it and it makes it 2 inches. So that means whatever fabric width you start with is what your flower will end up being. I started with a 2-inch fabric piece, I got a 2-inch flower. And this is about 4 inches. If I fold it over and make my flower all the way around, then it would be a 4-inch flower. You just have to keep that in mind, and the longer your strip is, the more bunches you're going to end up with your fabric. Like this one has a lot of bunches, but it's perfect for this 2-inch flower here. And so you've got to make sure that you have a long enough piece if you're going to make a bigger flower. Because these were 7 inches long, and it's perfect for the 2-inch flower. There's that. Okay, let's put this all aside, and let's make a tulle flower. And for this one I'm going to use the pink. I'll just talk about this one first because I'm going to make the pink one a little bit differently. For this flower I did it a little bit differently, and I have different dimensions. So I cut this fabric about 13 inches by about 2 inches. It was actually closer to 1.5 inches, and so I end up with about a 3-inch flower here. And the reason I used such a long strip is because I really wanted it to overlap like it does. You can see all the overlapping pieces. So I'm going to do the same thing but with the pink. Let's see, let's start at 12 inches, pulling it across 2 more inches. I'm going to cut right at about 14 inches. It doesn't have to be straight and it doesn't have to be perfect. It's supposed to look handmade. I've got this, it's about 14 inches, and then this way I'm going to measure it. It's about 10 inches, so I'm going to again go with about 2 inches here. I forgot to tell you guys the quantity. So with these flowers here, if I make them all like this, and they're about 13 to 14 inches and 2 inches wide, I can make about 20 flowers with this one section here. Same thing with this one. I'll get about 20 of these flowers out of that one piece of the pink tulle. Okay, got my strip. I need to get my needle again. And I don't have much thread on here, so I'm going to go ahead and get some new thread. And I also want to note that you don't see the thread except inside the button. And so I wasn't worried about changing colors for the blue, but I'm actually going to change colors for the pink. And so I grabbed some brown thread. It's just what I had. Just cut it closer to the end. Now I've got that. I'm going to start the same way, except I'm not folding over. And for this you can fold it over if you want the double layer here. But for I just wanted one layer since it was so long and it's going to create so many different little folds. Okay, so I've got it going through. I need to stick my thread through the little hole. It makes it into a knot. You can see my thread didn't stay till the very end, so I've got that knot because the tulle has such big holes, but I still got it tied up at the end. I'm just going to zigzag it about every 1/4 of an inch. I'm going through the tulle back and forth. This one takes longer because there's double the amount of fabric. We're almost to the end. Yay! Okay. Got it all the way. Let's see, I got it tangled on the front piece. There we go. Tightening it all the way across here. So for this one, for my last flower, I'll show you. I didn't sew up the seam here, so you can see both seams are showing. Let's see if you can see it there. And it's open on this end. I didn't like this big gap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to overlap before I close up my little circle here. I'm going to overlap the two layers at the very end and then sew through both layers. Just near the center. I'm not going to go sew down the seam. Just making sure that both of the layers line up together. I'm going to pull this really, really tight. So what I'm left with is I've got it covered up here. Since I'm going to sew the button directly in this middle, I'm going to keep my thread. I'm going to go through the middle just a couple times to keep this tight. It kind of makes a knot. Just going over and over. Okay, so I've got my knot tied in the middle here, and then I'm just going to go back up through the middle, making sure I'm going through some of the tulle, not the very center of the little flower here. I guess you would say it's a big flower. And then I'm going to find a button that I like on here. I've got some pink buttons. Add to the middle and make it all pink. Also got a red in case you want to make it Valentine's-y. My thread is brown, so it would look good with the pink button. Or I could go with a brown button. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and go with the pink with the brown thread accent. And if you see, the tulle overlapping a bit and I'm not left with that gap. Like I've got the tiny little gap here on this one, just because I overlapped it just a little bit. So now I've got to get my button on here. Get it down to where I need it. Then poke through the other hole in the back here. You can see I'm not very coordinated with my sewing. Okay, got that in the center. Go back through it a couple more times. And let's take a look. 3 looks good. It's not showing up very much. It's just a subtle little detail. Then I'm going to knot this back one like I didn't have enough thread to knot the side of that fabric one. Go through here and that turns it into a knot at the bottom here. Do that twice just in case. Make sure we've got it all fastened and nothing's going to come undone. Okay, give it a last look. It looks good. Let's cut that. We've got all the mess in the back hidden by that button. When we lay it flat, you don't see any of the brown except right there on the button, which is what I want. There's another one. This one's a little bit bigger because this one was done about 1.5 inches across. This was actually fully 2 inches. So that makes it about 4 inches on my grid here. Got a big one, a small one. Let's try one more thing. I'm going to grab my pink piece that I cut at 14 inches across. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to do a double layer. You can barely even see that. I'm glad I got the white paper out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut one piece at 1.5 inches. My air conditioning came on, so my fabric's moving all over the place now. This one I'm going to do at 1 inch. I got this one. I'm going to lay the 1 inch piece over the top. And then I'm going to sew it the exact same way. I've still got, as soon as I let this go, it's going to fly. Let's put the scissors on top. I'm going to tie another knot at the end. I'm going to sew through both these. I have them lined up together at this edge. Sew through both and then add my knot here at the end by going through those 2 strands. I'm just sticking my needle through the strands. That creates the knot in the middle. That keeps my thread on there. And now we're going to do our zigzag again all the way across. Both of them. I'm going to keep them lined up together at this end. And just keep going back and forth. almost to the end. Okay, I'll try to get 2 more in here. One there, one at the very end. Go through all the way. And then when we get to the end, I'm going to overlap the very ends again. Overlap a little bit. And then go through both layers. That way they're on top of each other and there's no extra area showing that at that end. Pull it tight. And I'm going to just sew through the middle and get a knot in here by sewing through the loop. Okay, so you can already see it looks a little bit different with the little extra layer in the center here. It makes the middle a little bit brighter. I can attach our button. I'm just going to get this secured with a couple of strands back and forth. Then we'll be done with this one. I'm running out of thread here. I'll poke it through the back and go through my loop, and then I'll just have one knot on the back since I'm getting low on thread. There's the other pink one. Okay, so let's look at everything we've got. We've got this big one, and it'll lay a little bit differently than these other ones that just have the one layer. We've got all these different ones. I'm going to walk through all the measurements one more time, and then we'll talk about the pricing. So we've got all of these different ones. Let's start with these two. Okay, so for the fabric ones, we just had the strip that's 2 inches by 7 inches, and it made these 2-inch little flowers here. So with this one, we had about a 13-inch strip by 1.5-inch strip, and we got about a 3-inch across little flower here. It's just one layer of the tulle, not folded across. And then the next one, we made a much larger one. We've got about a 14-inch piece of fabric by 2 inches, and we got this big, almost 4-inch flower. For our last one, we've got 2 different pieces of tulle. One layer is 14 inches by 1.5 inches, and then the other one is 14 inches by about 1 inch. So we're left with a lot in the center with that double layer, and then it goes with just one layer to the outside here. So this one's a lot poofier, and then we've got these 2 that are a little bit flatter, and then we've got some fabric ones. So you can do this with any size strip. I just showed you a variety of ways to do it. And then let's talk about the pricing. So we've got these ones. So for these fabric ones, all I needed that I didn't already have in my stash was the fabric itself. And I actually did have fabric, I just have it in storage. I can't access it. So I bought the one strip of fabric. I've got all the prices written out. So I'll walk through the prices. I'm just going to write them under here. I'll write them to the side and then show you guys. Okay, so it was 1/8 of a yard, and it was a $10 per yard fabric, and it was on sale 30% off. Okay, so that made my 1/8 yard for 87 cents. Okay, so that's all I spent is 87 cents. I had everything else, and let's say I didn't have the thread, this whole thing of thread was 50 cents. So when you add the 87 cents, 7 cents plus about 50 cents, when you add tax and whatever, you'll get about $1.50. Okay, so let's say that's about how much I spent. It's $1.50 to make these fabric things, and for $1.50 I could make 18 of these flowers. We got 18 flowers for that $1.50, which is really, really good. And I'm sorry, my handwriting totally stinks. So 18 flowers for $1.50 is so cheap. If you buy any of those, you know, already hand-sewed flowers. They're really expensive. They're like $5 a pack, and you get, what, maybe 6 flowers. So this is a really, really cheap alternative to those flowers that you buy pre-made. I'll write it to the side here so we can see both side by side. So for these, I'll start with just one because I paid 50 cents per color here. So I got a 1/4 of a yard for these because it was so cheap. 1/4 of a yard, and that was $2 a yard, which made my 1/4 of a yard end up being 50 cents. Okay, and let's say we didn't have the thread again. That's another 50 cents. So we're looking at $1 for this project here. And that makes about 20 flowers. So you're getting 20 flowers. Oops. 20 flowers for that $1. See that? I'll put this one up here and you can compare the two. Okay, so that's a really, really good way to make your own embellishments. And you can see it didn't take me very much time. And you could just make a bunch of them at one time and then have all these flowers saved up. Use them on different projects. So altogether I spent $1.87 getting these 3 sets of fabric because I already had the thread. So that's a really, really cheap project, and out of that I'd get 40 flowers from the tulle altogether plus the 18 flowers. So that's 58 flowers I could make. I think we're probably out of time, but if not, I'll make a project using one of these flowers. Thanks for watching. Bye.